Today, I wanted to dive into my journey, my story as an author to hopefully inspire you, but also show you all of the ups and downs and persistence and consistency that it takes to succeed. And I know that everyone has a different definition of success. There are obviously so many authors and creatives who have sold way more books than me, and there are people that haven't and have sold less. And so, no matter where you are on your journey, I hope that my story can inspire you in some way or make you feel excited about your own journey too. So, this is very unscripted. I haven't planned this at all. I just want to chat with you really today and just sit here in my cozy library and talk to you. And so, that starts with me always knowing that I wanted to be a writer. There was never a question in my head. I've loved books and writing since the moment that I could learn to read and the moment that I could hold a pen. I loved words and I loved what they meant, and I knew that I wanted to tell stories. And so all growing up, I read a million books a day and just read nonstop, and also wrote a lot. I wrote short stories. I didn't really write much poetry, which is funny that that's now what I do all the time. And I also wrote my first novel in high school, which was through NaNoWriMo. So I challenged myself to write a novel, 50,000 words in 1 month. And I did that in 10th grade, I believe it was. And that never saw the light of day. It actually got deleted, and I can't believe that I deleted it, but I did. Because I just read back through it a couple years later and was like, this is not good. Anyways, my real journey started whenever I moved to college, and I moved out of state, and I was navigating change of moving away and not really knowing anyone and wanting to really document this new experience for me. And so I started writing every day, and I said every day for a year, I'm going to write and post my work on Tumblr, which is where I started sharing my work originally. But when I started doing that, I had very low self-esteem and a lot of self-doubt about not only my writing abilities, but just everything about myself. And that really came through in my work a lot. And so I actually started off writing like little stories each day. And that got to be a lot. Whenever I was in college and in classes and doing homework and finals, like I could not keep up with writing an entire short story per day. So I think that lasted like a week. But as I was on Tumblr, I was engaging with other writers, which we'll definitely come back to later on. But I was engaging with a lot of writers and looking at what else was being posted. And I found like modern poetry and thought, what a beautiful way to express yourself. And I really fell in love with it. And that's when I started sharing it myself. I started reading a lot of poetry. I started checking out poetry books from the library and really delving into this form of writing, and decided, okay, actually cut the short stories. I'm going to start writing a poem a day for a year and share it online. And that's what I started doing. And at that time I was writing anonymously because, again, self-doubt was rampant. And I wasn't, I guess, taking it as seriously as I should have, even though it felt serious to me and I was sharing it online. And that was a huge step that I had never taken before. I didn't really connect the dots of wanting people to know that it was me and wanting to have people who enjoyed my work. And so it stayed anonymous for that entire year. But I think I eventually put my last name on things. I started signing things as Lee. And that year went by of writing every single day for a year. There were actually some days that I missed and I would catch up and do like 2 the next day. And there were days where I wrote like 2 lines and that's what I posted, and some things were really bad and I got it out there. And I don't think I realized it at the time, but that was like lesson number 1 for me, was being consistent and not allowing bad, in quotes, in air quotes, bad writing to stop me, because I kept going anyway. Even if I knew that something was bad, I was like, I'm committed to this year and I'm going to follow through. And I think that, takes persistence and some determination, and also just being able to allow myself to potentially be embarrassed, because I was also putting my work out there for people to comment on when I was a brand new poet and didn't know what I was doing. And that might sound silly or stupid to some people, but I think that first year really helped me branch out and see that it's not as scary as a lot of people think it is to put yourself out there. And I did get comments of people that didn't enjoy my work, but I also got a lot of people that did. And so that first year also taught me about engaging with other people and being a part of a community. I never just posted and left. I posted and then I would go interact with other writers and spend some time doing that, commenting, following people that I enjoyed, even just liking posts that I enjoyed. And I got to see other writing styles along the way and meet other authors and connect with them. And I also would interact with other readers of people who were talking about poetry books that I loved. And I would comment that I also loved them and share my favorite poems they had written and all of that, and really was engaged in the community at that time. And I think that that really helped me grow, because people would come back and they would then find me from a comment and they would interact with me and follow me, back. And I wasn't following people for a follow back, and I don't recommend that, but I was just genuinely having a really fun time with it. And so we're going to fast forward to the end of that year, when some readers said you should take that year of poetry that you just did and put it into a book and self-publish a book. Now, this was 2016. At that time, I know self-publishing existed and people were doing it. However, I had never heard of it. I didn't know of people really that were self-publishing books. I was, again, just getting into poetry in that past year. So I did know of like Milk and Honey being self-published, as well as Amanda Lovelace's first book, The Princess Saves Herself, in this one, and both of those that I had learned about in that past year of writing online. And so I started to learn more about it. I started doing my research. Another lesson is that things don't just come to us. You really have to do your diligence and your research here. And so I started looking into platforms. I joined some different like writing forums on Facebook and things like that to hear other people's experiences. And I self-published my first book. Now, I could have done this so much better, but we all learn along the way, and typically, our second book is going to be better than our first, and so on. So again, I didn't let myself get stopped because it wasn't perfect. I actually knew that it wasn't perfect, but I put it out there anyway because that was what I could do at that time with my budget, which was $0. And the skills that I had, which were not many because I was a freshman in college and I could write and I knew that I could manage without typos and things like that. I did like self-edit my work. However, I had a competition for the cover that first year on Tumblr because I, again, had no budget for a cover. And you make it work, basically, is my point, is that you make it work if you want something. And I wanted to publish a collection of my poetry. And so that's how my first book came to be. Now, I've talked about this before because I've talked about my launch strategy and how that has changed and evolved over the years. And so that first launch was crickets because I didn't talk about it. I didn't promote it. I had an audience on Tumblr at the time. I was just now a year after writing and publishing my first book saying, hey, my name is actually Shelby. This is who I am. And so I didn't do all of that for, the first year. And so nobody knew who I was. And I also wasn't talking about the book. I didn't tell anyone that it was coming. I maybe did one post saying like, hey, I have a book, it'll be out next week, but nothing about what it's about, how it's going to impact people, all of the things that I've learned since then about having a launch runway and really warming my audience up to it. And so I launched my book. Also, the timing was nothing I even dreamt of thinking about with that first book. I think I launched it like a week before Christmas, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend because a lot of people have their gifts for others by then. A lot of people have just spent their holiday money and their budget getting gifts for their loved ones and preparing for the holidays. And so people are also offline a lot during that time. So I didn't even think about the timeline of it. I just did it. In some ways, I look back on myself with like a lot of gratitude because I'm really glad that I didn't let that stop me and say, you know what, it's a bad time. Let me push it off until February or March when it's better. Maybe it would have gotten better. I will never know, but I did what I did and didn't kind of hold myself back with those like little questions and those little things. So yeah, I think I sold like 2 copies in that first week and I didn't know how to talk about it. And just let me flash forward also, because I think this is another lesson for you and a lesson for me for sure, is that your product has a long lifetime. Unless it is very specific to like the current time, which a lot of time that isn't the case. Books have a long lifetime and creative work has a long lifetime. And that book, I honestly haven't tallied up the sales of that book in probably over a year, to be honest. But the last time I checked, it sold 7,000 or 8,000 copies. And it could have sold 2 if I had let that week 1 go and say, okay, this book was a flop, on to my next. So we have to keep talking about our work and keep promoting our work over time. And I hustled that first year. I hustled by, I emailed like 400 bookstores for starters, asking them to carry my book. I was posting on social media all the time and learning as I went and figuring out who I was, what my brand was, what my mission was as a writer, what made my work stand out, and constantly showing up for myself and talking about my book and interacting with other readers and interacting with other writers and collaborating with other writers and feeling like I was a part of the community. And honestly, I think that first year was one of the most fun because it was a lot of work, but I just made so many connections because I was putting myself out there so much. And so another lesson, you have to show up for yourself. No one is going to show up for yourself like you do. And you have to be persistent, especially if you're not getting results right away. Like I said, I posted for a year, and yes, I did grow a following from that, but I also didn't let 2 sales stop me from showing up. I just knew that I could do better. I didn't let that number say, okay, this means that this is a flop and this isn't for me. I let it tell me, okay, let's dig into this and how we can actually make it better. Because it's very rare that something can just completely fail. It's more so like, hey, let's look at the analytics and what the data is telling us and see how we can optimize and tweak this to be better. And so that was my first book. My second book was the one that really kind of changed the course of my career, I would say. And that one I learned so much from just doing the first book and getting it out there, even though it wasn't perfect, that with my second book, I had a cover that was created by someone who does poetry book covers and knew what they were doing. I hired a formatting company, and it looked just infinitely more professional than my first book, my first attempt. And I also did a launch runway for the book where I really took the time to announce the cover, announce the title, announce the release date, and slowly give bits and pieces of what the book's about, revealing, quotes from it and all of that, and really focusing on that book launch period where I just talked about it all the time and told stories about the behind the scenes of it and where it came from and all of that. And it didn't have like the most successful launch in the world. Like it did pretty good. It did way better than my first book. And again, it took me some time to find those readers. So that was 2019 that I self-published Changing with the Tides. And I, again, never stopped talking about it. I kept showing up for myself and I kept interacting with my community and building my community on social media. And I joined TikTok in early 2020 and talked about it nonstop there as well. And then I had some bigger moments toward the end of 2020, 2021, 2022. I experienced kind of my first like viral moments. And in those couple of years, I got an agent and I got offered a book deal to republish Changing with the Tides. Now that's rare, to self-publish a book and get an offer to republish. I honestly think it's more popular in poetry. A lot of other genres that I know of and have worked with authors, it's pretty rare once you put your work out there that someone wants to republish it. But that's what happened for me. And I was shocked. It was after work, after I was done working. And at that time, I was working in a marketing job after college. This was years later. And I was sitting in my room, and my boyfriend, now husband at the time, was just in the kitchen, like making us dinner. And I like looked at my email and I was like, there's absolutely no way. Like I surely thought it was a scam, like a scam email offering like a book deal for that book. And so that's when I knew I really had something, right? Because I know that that doesn't happen for everyone. And of course, like people that stay with self-publishing as well are amazing. Self-publishing is such an amazing route to go. I really wanted to see the opportunity of being traditionally published and just try it. And so I'm glad that I ended up going with it. But self-publishing is amazing and was the path that I started on. And I would never regret doing that. So yeah, that was crazy and just an amazing opportunity. And that is because I never stopped talking about that book for 3 years. Okay. I knew that I had a good book. I knew that people were resonating with it and that they were enjoying it. And so I didn't shut up about it. For 3 years, I marketed that book. And so whenever I get questions, and I completely get them and they're so valid, saying, well, I released my book 3 months ago and it never got any traction, so I'm moving on to my next book and I want help marketing that one and launching that one, I say, please give that book a chance. You haven't given it a chance to find its readers yet, and you have time to do that. Now, absolutely, you can keep writing more books in the meantime. I certainly was, and there's no problem with that at all. And maybe you launch your next book and that one goes better, and then your readers go back and find that previous book. That's totally valid. But don't stop talking about that book. Keep going, keep promoting it, keep showing up for yourself. Okay. And so then after that one, I got that republished the following summer. I also was working on my third book and had gotten a deal with a different publisher for that book as well, a poetry publisher who is awesome. And they published my third book in January of 2023. So we are now, I started writing online 2015, 2016, self-published my book in 2016. So we're like, 6 or 7 years later, that I still consistently am showing up on social media, talking about my stuff, growing my audience. This is not an overnight success story, okay? This takes time, and it's gone by really fast. And there were certainly times where I thought, okay, this is the end. Like, my engagement's so bad right now, or my audience just isn't growing right now. And I've always, always, always kept with it. I've taken breaks here and there. I really have, but not like extended breaks. I've continued showing up for myself, and it has paid off. And so if you are, again, in like toward the beginning of your journey, or you were showing up for yourself and gave up, and you were kind of like listening to this thinking, okay, I might have given up on myself too soon. And I really hope that you'll listen to this and go back to it and show up for yourself, because it's so important and it's so critical in the creative world to show up for yourself. I mean, I'm sure that most people listening to this, like myself, were told and have been told that you can't be successful in your industry, whether you're an author, an artist, a musician, whatever it is that you do. I was certainly told by people, like, I would get laughed at if I said I was a poet or a writer. I remember submitting my first book proposal and someone saying like, oh, you're going to try to get actually published? Like, you think a publisher is going to want your poetry? And I said, yeah, actually. And I did get rejections along the way. And actually that book proposal did get a rejection, but I kept showing up for myself. So that's my motto, if I haven't said it enough in this video. So yeah, my fourth book is a week from being out whenever this video goes up. And I'm going to shout about that one from the rooftops. And I'm going to talk about it for months and months and months after it is out. And I'm going to let it find its readers. And I hope you do the same for your stuff. Now, if you're here, you know that I have a company called Marketing by Shelby, and I started that because I studied marketing in school. I went to school for marketing and communications for college, and during that time, I was also, as we've learned, growing my own author brand and audience and learning how this social media thing works and to sell books. And after I graduated, I learned, and just by speaking to so many authors and helping them, that there was a missing piece, that social media can be fun. It can be less overwhelming. It doesn't have to take up all of your time. I worked a full-time job. I also was a full-time student while doing all of this. Caveat there is that I don't have like children or really anything to take care of besides like my house. And I like to hang out with my husband, but I understand that there's a lot of different things and priorities that people are balancing also who watch my videos and are here. And so I completely understand that. My goal is to make marketing fun for you, less time consuming. And I do that through teaching step-by-step guides. So I have one for TikTok. I have one for Instagram. I also have my membership called the Creatives Content Club. And that's my favorite offer that I have because it's hands-on. I get to work with you if you contribute yourself. And by that, I mean, you have to show up for yourself still. So we have this full social media course inside the club, but the people that get the most out of it are going through the course and applying what they've learned And they're in the community also asking questions, and I review your social media posts and give you feedback. And it's an awesome, awesome, awesome community. So if you are on this journey, and this is for all creatives too, if you're an author, an artist, a musician, a photographer, if, we have people who are like selling prints, we have Etsy sellers and people who make things with their amazing head and their amazing heart. And so if that is you, I recommend joining us in the Creatives Content Club, and I'll link it for you below. We have about 300 people in there, and it's amazing. And the other thing I'll point you to is if you're new to launching, I also have the Lifetime Launch course, and that is where you'll learn my launch strategy for social media in 1 hour. And so I've talked a lot about launching in this video and what I've learned over the years of launching and getting hundreds, if not thousands, of pre-orders and orders during my launch weeks. And so that course I'll also link for you in the description of this episode. I think that's it. I just wanted to share my story, and I hope that there was something good in here for you to take away and to apply to your own stuff. And I'd also love to hear your story too. If you don't mind, in the comments, just sharing with me like what you do, how it's been going for you, how long you've been at it, how you're showing up for yourself. Just anything that you want to share would be awesome. And thank you so much for watching and listening to this video. I really had fun just sitting down and chatting with you today. And I appreciate you for being here and being a part of this community. It really means the world to me. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Have a great week, and I'll be back next week with a new one. Bye.